So in this video I'm going to show you 5 stitches that are great for creating texture in your embroidery. This is the express version. If you want to see the full length version where I go into more detail about these stitches and how you can create more texture with them, I'll put a link to that video up in the right hand corner here. If you enjoy our videos, do give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. That will bookmark our channel so you can find us again easily, and if you'd like a notification of when we upload something new, you can click the little bell too. Okay, so let's get going. So this is a great stitch for creating little points of texture, little lumps of texture. It also seems to be people's nemesis, this one, so it isn't difficult, you just need to know how. So I'm going to use 6 strands to make this a nice big knot. I'm coming up in the fabric where I want my knot to sit, so I'm going to pull my thread towards me, my needle is above it, away from me, and all I'm going to do is take the thread over the top of the needle, back underneath, and it creates that V shape. Now you can see I'm keeping the tension on that, that's important, and I'm going to pull the thread down so the needle goes back into the fabric. Now don't go into the same hole you came out of, that's quite important, so just next to it, doesn't really matter which side, but just don't go down the same hole. So the needle goes back into the fabric. Now pull that tight. This thread is tight. You can actually let go of that if you like, or you can just keep your finger on it and pull your needle through to the back, and that will create your knot. So just pull it slowly so you can control the tension of it. And there's a French knot, so I'll just do a few of those for you. So your needle comes up where you want the knot to sit, thread comes towards you, needle is above it, away from you, thread goes over the needle and back underneath, keep the tension on that, needle goes back into the fabric close to where you came out but not the same hole. If you do the same hole, it will just pull the knot through to the back. Pull the thread tight, that's important. You can either keep the tension on that if you want to, pull it through, control it down nice and tightly to get your knot. So I'll do a few of those. Over and back, needle in, pull tight, pull through to the back. If you're left-handed, you can just reverse everything I'm doing. So your needle will be that way around and you'll be going over and back like so. And if you keep the tension on it, that's the trick to French knots, so they don't all look different. Keep the tension at this point when the needle goes in and here. Don't let go of it here because that's when you get a baggy knot. So keep that tension and you'll get the same even French knot every time. I suggest if you want to make a bigger knot that you use another thread rather than wrap it twice, because they can do something a bit different if you wrap them twice. You can wrap them twice if you want to, once, twice. It's a little bit harder to get the needle through. I suggest using a thicker thread rather than wrapping twice. You can see how quickly you can get into a rhythm, and they make really nice little bobbles. So really great for adding instant texture. I'm just going to put one up there. So there we go, some nice textured French knots. So another great way of making little areas of texture are granitos. So these consist of straight stitches, so they're really easy to do. So I'm going to make them quite small. I'm using 6 strands again to make them nice and textured, and I'm going to back up where I did my first stitch, and I'm going to go back in where I finished my first stitch. So it looks like I'm doing 2 stitches over the top of each other, and I'm just going to hold it, and I'll use my malure so you can see what I'm doing, just holding it to the right and pulling it through. So that stitch sits to the right of the first one. Come back up through the same hole, they should share the holes, and back down in the same hole, and then this stitch is going to sit to the left. Now depending on how you want them to look and what thread you've used, you can just stick at 3 stitches if you want, or if you want to put a few more in. There's no right or wrong about how many stitches you put in this, but just bear in mind you're coming up and down the same hole each time, so the more stitches you put in a hole, the more it will distort the fabric. So just keep going until you've got the number you like. Now that's 4, that looks quite nice. I'll do another one above it. Don't make them too long, they look nice when they're little short round stitches. You just come to one side, doesn't matter which side you come to first, but just hold it down so it sort of sits flat to the side of that first stitch. Even angling my needle in a little bit just to encourage it to do that. So that's 3 stitches, so that's what it looks like with 3. I'm going to stick another one in because I think they look really nice. That's 4, let's go for a 5th to make it really nice and round. So you choose how many you put in. So that's 5, so you can see how that one's a little bit bigger, and I'll just do another couple on either side. So just make sure you share the hole. So stitch in the middle, stitch to one side, stitch to the other side, and I'll leave those as 3 stitches so you can see what they look like. Just encourage them to lie down. And obviously if you use a finer thread you'll get them come out much more spindly, so you might want to make them a bit smaller if you use a finer thread. So that's 3. So that's Granitos. So this is one well worth having in your knowledge bank. You can do all sorts of things with this stitch, but I'm just going to show you the stitch on its own in this one, and I'm going to use a wool blend. This is a Lana thread, so it's 50% wool, 50% acrylic, because this makes a really nice fluffy stitch, and wool makes a great fluffy stitch. I'm going to use wool for this. I've just doubled it up because this is quite fine, and this is the only stitch I know that you start from the top. You don't start with a knot underneath and bring the thread up from underneath, you start from the top without a knot. So I've got my 2 ends there, and I'm going to just start inside this shape. I've just done a back stitch around these hearts just to define a shape. I'm going to leave a little tail, and I'm going to come up to the left of that point. See, I'm just holding that tail out of the way. I'm going to make a loop around the top and come down to the right of that point. Now, before I pull that all the way through, I'm just going to come back up where I started, and then you can let go of that loop and just pull it tight. And then you can snip that off, and you get this little tail. So we'll do another one of those. So you start in the middle of the stitch. So you notice I'm just starting to the right of that one I've just done. So I can come up to the left, which is the end of that first one. Make my loop around the top. That just helps to keep the thread out of the way. Before you pull that loop all the way through, you can see how I'm just sort of holding the loop up and the tail down. That makes it easy to see what I'm doing. I'm going to come back up in the middle of that loop. Got 2 threads, so just have to make sure I keep the tension the same, and I can cut that off, and then you can cut this at any, make that nice and even, so any length that you like really. So I'll show you another row. Now you'll notice I started at the bottom of this shape and I'm working on top. If I now try and work underneath that tail, I've got to fight all these little ends. So always start this one at the bottom of the shape you're working and work upwards so that each layer sits on top of the previous layer. Now you don't have to cut it each time if you don't want to. I'm not going to cut now, I'm just going to carry on. And you'll see now I get a loop. So if you want to keep the loops as they are, you can, or you can cut them afterwards. So I'll just work a couple more. The method is still the same, up to the left, down to the right. Don't pull that loop through until you come back up in the middle, and this needle should sit underneath that loop when you pull it down. So down in the middle, up to the left, down to the right, back up in the middle, then pull that loop tight. Fit one more in there. If you're left-handed, you can go from right to left. And if you want, you can go up on the left, up on the right and down on the left and back up in the middle. Doesn't matter which way. And get to the end of my row, I'm just going to cut that off. And then if you want to cut your loops, just put your scissors in the middle and snip. Notice I'm pulling them up just so I get the middle. And if I want to cut those to length, I can, so I can have them nice and short. So really great for making texture. You can have it long, you can have them short, and then the more you do, the more it will fluff up. And I'll show you some more of that technique in the full length version, so do check that out. So a slightly more complicated knotted stitch now. These are bullion knots. So if you want something longer than a French knot, this is a great one to do. So I'm going to bring my needle out of the fabric where I want the knot to start, take it down where I want it to finish. You can choose how long you want this to be, and I'm creating a loop. The loop is very important, don't pull the loop through. Then the needle comes back up where I started. Don't bring the needle all the way through, because we're now going to wrap that with this thread. Now it's the thread that's coming out the same hole as the needle, not the other one. It's this thread here. Doesn't matter which way around you go. Just not too tightly, and you just want enough wrap so that when you lie the needle down they meet the other thread. Now this is the slightly tricky bit. I'm going to try and show you if I can. So finger underneath, thumb on top, not gripping that too tightly because I want to pull this needle through those loops, and I'm just going to pull it all the way till it's tight. Now it'll look a mess at this point, don't worry about that. It's not doesn't need to come out, it's not going to go anywhere, and it forms a triangle. So if you put your needle in the triangle and pull it up, pull your thread away from you, and you can just pull those little wraps down to the bottom. Now it looks a little bit uneven, so the trick here is to put your needle underneath the knot and just rub it back and forth gently, and that will even out those coils. It will also loosen it, so you'll just need to tighten it again by pulling on this one, and just do that until you've got them nice and even. I find that people stop their bullion knots too soon normally, and they go, oh, they're messy and I can't do them, and it's just because they're not finished really. And then to finish it off, we need to take this thread through to the back, so the needle just goes down at the end of the stitch there, just to finish it off. So I'll do another one. So up and down, make this one slightly longer, make a loop, needle comes up where you first came out of the fabric. Okay, go. Don't bring the needle all the way through because you're going to wrap it with the thread. The bigger the loop, the easier this is to do, by the way. So if you're running out of thread, change your thread. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's try that. Slightly too many, so I'm going to come back to 4. That's good. That's now meeting the other thread when I lie the needle down. Just pull the needle through those coils. I'm just supporting it with my thumb and my finger there until I get that triangle. Needle goes in the triangle. Just encourage those coils down. You can tighten it by pulling on this thread here. Rub them underneath to neaten them up a little bit. Keep pulling, keep rubbing until you're happy that that's nice and neat. Just keep going until you've got what you want. These are quite sturdy stitches. You can keep playing with them until they're right. So there's 2 bullion knots. Do check out the full length version and I'll show you how you can create even more texture with this stitch. So the last one I want to show you is not so much using a thread, but it's a really good one for creating instant texture. And we're going to put some beads down. So here's my beads. And I'm going to just use a fine sewing cotton to put these down with. I've doubled it up, just makes it a little bit stronger. The beads are made of glass, well these ones are, and they can be a little bit sturdy. They do fly around a bit as well if you're not careful. And these are very easy to put on, but brilliant for texture and go really beautifully with embroidery. So I've just come up where I want the bottom of the bead to sit, threaded it onto the needle. Do check that the bead will go over the eye of the needle, so you need quite a fine needle. These are large seed beads, these are number 9, so they're quite large. And then I'm pushing it to the bottom, and I want to go down the other side of the bead. Don't go down the same hole or they'll roll around on the top. So just down the other side, like so. Let's get another one because that one flew off. So just thread it on, slide it to the bottom, push the bead up and take the needle down on the other side. Really great if you want a bit of extra sparkle as well. Now you can do one more thing with this, and I'll just show you that. If you want the not quite so high with your texture, you want it a little bit flatter, you can sew the beads down so they're flat. So we've done them so that they're standing up on end like that, but we can flatten them down. So I'm just going to stitch down one side. I'll do it slowly so you can see. Now you'll need 2 stitches because it stands on end, so I'm going to come up the other side and back down the middle, and that will mean the bead lies flat. So you get a flatter texture doing it this way. And you can see more of the thread, so you might want to consider just using a single thread if you're going to do it in this direction. It's got 2 stitches, so it will be more secure anyway. So down into the middle and the bead will lie flat. So a couple of ways of putting beads down to add some really lovely texture to your embroidery. So as I said, don't forget to check out the full length version of this video, and I'll show you a little bit more about how you can use these stitches to create even more texture. If you've liked it, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to click that subscribe button, and do check out all our other videos. We've got over 200 embroidery videos, so lots there to see. So thank you for watching.